today I'll be talking about a study looking at social phone books, and this was done with my intern Ying-Yu Chen, who is from the University of Washington. So let's think back to what mobile phone books looked like before the smartphone. They were pretty much just lists of names and phone numbers, and they were manually entered on the phone. And for the most part, they represented the people that we called and texted in our daily lives, because we had to manually enter them in the phone. But 5 years ago at Chi, I stood on a stage similar to this and talked about this new thing we had made called the social phone book. And this was a product we made at Motorola called MotoBlur that would take your Facebook contacts, your Gmail contacts, your Twitter contacts, everything, and put it in one big giant list. So all of your contacts were available on the phone, all in one place. They'd all get updated. You know, this was such a great thing that we came and talked about here on stage, and this took off. We had a Super Bowl commercial about it. It ended up being integrated in the core part of Android by Google. So now when you install Facebook, one of the things that happens is it puts all your Facebook contacts into your phone book. And then Android became the dominant mobile operating system with over 1 billion users right now. So there are 1 billion people using these social phone books, and there is almost nothing in the Chi literature or any literature about these phone books. Who is in them? How are people using them? What is working and what isn't working in this new social phone book? And as an ancillary to this, at Yahoo, we were working on making our own social phone book, so we wanted to understand the use of the existing ones. It's also important to study social phone books because more third-party apps are automatically adding all of your contacts from your phone book as friends in their systems. You know, if you install WhatsApp, all of a sudden, everybody in your phone book can see your availability, can see your status, and that's just the default thing that happens when you install it. In Path, they can even see your location, they can see the music you're playing. In apps like Spotify, they can see the music that you're playing. So we really wanted to look at the phone book and say, are these really trusted contacts? Are these people that you might want to be automatically added as friends and automatically be able to see presence about in these systems? So to do this, we conducted a survey to look at a variety of people's phone books on their devices. They completed a consent form, and then we had them install an Android app on their phone. And that Android app would collect their phone book, all of the names from the phone book, and then hashed contact details. So we never collected any phone numbers or email addresses, but we captured the hashes so we could correlate the phone book with the SMS and call history so we could see who was actually contacted out of the phone book. And then we provided them a code to use in an online survey where we asked them questions about 25 random contacts. And I'll show you those questions in a moment, but it's getting at sort of who they are, how close do you feel to them, when did you last communicate with them. We had some general questions about communication, some demographics, and it took about 20 minutes to complete the survey, and participants were all paid for their time. These were the questions that we asked about the randomly selected contacts. So we wanted to know, are they friends, colleagues, businesses? Do you not know who they are at all? When did you communicate with them? Would you want to share different information with those people in various apps? And then 4 questions on tie strength, which they rated on a 5-point scale. So we had 200 participants from all over the US complete the survey. They were from 35 different states, broad age ranges, nice male-female mix, pretty much US average of college graduates. And from all of these people, we collected about 66,000 contacts and detailed survey information from about 5,000 contacts. We collected call logs of about 75,000 calls and over 300,000 SMS messages from these folks. And again, we didn't actually capture the messages themselves. We just grabbed some metadata about them to know who they were contacting. So the findings will be in 3 parts. I'll first talk about the structure of the phone book, who is in it, what are people named, how do these things work today. I'll talk a bit about communication practices for contacts in the phone book, and then talk a little bit about the use of contacts in other apps. So first, how big is a social phone book? We saw all kinds of different sizes from 26 to over 3,000 contacts. They had a mean of over 300 contacts and a median of about 165. But you can also see this other grouping here between 1,000 and 1,500. As far as where these contacts came from, 84% of participants said their Google or Gmail account was connected, which makes sense for an Android device, and about 70% had connected their Facebook accounts, and 17% had connected Yahoo accounts to their phone book. So you have about 308 people in the mean phone book. Who are they? Most surprisingly to us, 29% of the contacts in the phone book, people had no idea who they were. They saw the name, and we said, who is this person? And they said, I literally have no idea. I don't know if they're a friend, a colleague, anything. I just don't even recognize the name. And these are kind of random people, maybe from LinkedIn or Facebook, that you just don't even recognize the name anymore. And that's actually more than friends, that were only 22% of contacts. So there were more people you didn't know in your phone book than your actual friends, which was quite interesting to us. How close did people feel to the contacts? Like I mentioned, we had those 4 tie strength questions in the survey, and they were on a 0 to 4 scale. So 46% of all the contacts in your phone book have a 0 tie strength score. So you are very much not close to them in any way. You wouldn't lend them money. You don't enjoy hanging out with them. They're very, very low tie strength, and 6% had the maximum possible tie strength of 16. So the 6% of the people in your phone book you actually feel very, very close to. Continuing on the structure of the phone books, what were the contacts named? You would assume when you're building one of these social phone books, or at least you'd hope, that contacts had a nice first name, last name, so you could merge together the contacts from Facebook and Gmail and manually entered ones. However, 26% of contacts were a single word only, and even ones that had multiple words were not necessarily names, such as my wife, or lover boy, or boyfriend with a little heart, which is very, very cute, but we can't merge that with the actual identity of your boyfriend because we don't have the name there. So if you're trying to build a social phone book, at least a quarter of the contacts, you won't be able to merge by name alone. So that's a bit on structure. How did people communicate with the folks in their phone books? So we saw on average only 19 people out of the mean of 308 contacts were ever contacted via SMS since the person had bought the phone. So we went back in the whole SMS logs from the phone, and only 19 had some kind of SMS history, and only 17 had any phone history. So actually a very small number of people are actually contacted via SMS and phone. And for those of you saying, well, yeah, SMS, people aren't using SMS anymore, they're using WhatsApp and other things. In another study that we ran, we saw that in the US, SMS is still the #1 app that people launch on their phones. And that's in general because people don't really have a need to use WhatsApp. They get unlimited texting from their carriers, and for the most part don't need to text people out of the country. So SMS is still heavily used, and as I said, we only saw 19 people on average contacted via SMS. So more about communication. Let's just look at the top 5 contacts, the people you contact the most, the top 5 folks. That represented 85% or 84% of all phone calls and 81% of all text messages. So the top 5 people really are the majority of the folks that you contact. And T-Mobile in the US had this thing called My5 a number of years ago, sort of assuming that you contacted the top 5 people the most. And that is something that we were able to actually verify with our survey data, which was really nice to see. Other communication data, phone calls. The average phone call is 56 seconds long. Very, very short phone calls, and even the 75th percentile was less than 3 minutes. So people are making really, really short phone calls with each other, probably just quick coordinating phone calls and things like that. So moving on to the third part of the findings, what would people want to share with their contacts? So as I said before, apps like WhatsApp and Line are bringing in, Path are bringing in contacts, automatically adding them as friends, automatically sharing things like location and music history with them. What was really interesting to us, we sort of expected that people would sort of feel comfortable sharing calendar or mode of transportation, but not feel comfortable sharing location. And so we expected sort of similar numbers in the rows here, but instead we saw similar numbers in the columns. So pretty much no matter what information you want to share, you feel fairly comfortable sharing it with your partner. 79% of people felt comfortable sharing their location. But you don't want to share anything with your colleagues or anything with your acquaintances, or certainly nothing with a business. So that was really interesting for us to see. That wasn't exactly what we were expecting when we started out. And then looking at folks being automatically added in a variety of different apps, again, we sort of expected in a chat app, people would feel comfortable adding lots of different people, right? This is how WhatsApp works. This is how Path works. All of your contacts just get added as friends. However, again, we see it's the columns that people really feel comfortable with. A partner can be added in just about any app. Family members are pretty likely to want to be added as in apps. Acquaintances, friends of friends, colleagues, and businesses, not so much, no matter what kind of app it is. So that was very interesting to us as well, and not necessarily what we expected to see. We had an open-ended response after participants finished the survey, just to say, do you have any thoughts about your phone book after seeing these questions? And for the most part, people had no idea how many people were actually in their phone book. They didn't remember adding them. They didn't really understand how they got put in there. A lot of people talked about wanting to go through and deleting things now that they saw all these people that they had that they didn't even recognize. When you're doing a task of making a phone call, you just scroll really fast to get to whoever you're looking for, and you never let it sink in how many people you're scrolling past that you don't even know. So when people actually reflected on it after participating in the study, they're just like, yeah, I want to go delete these people. I don't know them. Wow, that's a lot of contacts. People were a bit shocked by it. So that was fairly interesting to us. So thinking about what this means, one of the interesting things we saw was this median of 165 contacts. That's sort of right in this Dunbar range of people in your network. And so that was kind of interesting to see quantitatively in a social phone book that it happens to be kind of right in that range. Thinking about Marsden's theory of discussion contacts, basically that you have 3 people in your life that you share important matters with. We saw that people have these 5 key contacts that they call on SMS the most, and that on average they have about 10 high tie strength contacts. So it's a little bit more than Marsden's 3. But that's what we saw in our data. One of the interesting things was Marsden had shown that the ratio of kin and non-kin in these discussion contacts was 1.07 in the work that he had done, and we found a ratio of 1.05. So that was just sort of interesting that we saw pretty much a similar range here. Some other interesting things, we saw this idea of transient contacts. So a lot of Craigslist email addresses were in the contacts. And you sell a sofa to someone, or you're trying to buy something, or other transient contacts. You have a TA for a class you're taking. They're valid for a small amount of time and then not valid any longer after that. So that might be something to think about when designing a phone book, is designing for these people who only come into your life for a short amount of time. And then when thinking about trusted contacts, only 6% of the contacts were in the highest high-strength bucket, and 29% of the contacts, like I said, were completely unknown to the participant. So probably auto-friending and auto-sharing things with everyone in your phone book is not the greatest idea. So Phonebook should make it super simple to get to the top 5 contacts and not assume that all contacts are trusted. Manual matching is often necessary, as a quarter of contacts only have a one-name entry. And make it clear to users where these contacts are coming from, and hide unused contacts or delete them entirely. So we built a social phone book at Yahoo. We have your most frequently contacted people at the top, so most of the time you don't need to scroll. And under each letter, we only show the people you've actually contacted, and then there's a little arrow to expand it for more if you want to get to more people. So this is some of the data that our study helped support these design decisions in the product. And now I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Hi, Nikhil Sharma, Google. Really interesting. Your data shows that people didn't know who these people were, a lot of people in the contact.
Yeah.
And they wanted to get rid of them. That's very helpful. But did you have any pre-study data from these people? If that was a prior concern going into the study, I'm wondering if the reflection of being in the study made them think about all these
Oh,
content?
certainly. Yeah, so certainly it was the reflection of being in the study that made them want to delete them.
I guess in other words, is this a real problem we should be worried about or not?
So, I mean, I think it is a real problem in that apps are automatically adding all of these people as trusted contacts. And so if WhatsApp is adding all of your friends and they can all see your status and your availability, or Path is letting them see your location, having 29% of people you don't even recognize or don't even know automatically added is the key problem.
Jason Weezy from Carnegie Mellon. Great work, as always, Frank.
Thanks.
So, you know, in some of our work recently, we've seen people that are high tie strength don't necessarily even have any communication.
Yes.
And so you highlighted that there were a lot of close people that had lots of communication, which we also saw, of course.
Sure.
But can you talk more about maybe other variation in that data?
Yeah, so we did see that same finding that you did. You made it first, so we didn't mention it in our talk here. But so certainly people who were high tie strength were not necessarily contacted frequently in the communication logs that we had. So you can't, as you showed very well, you can't necessarily go from communication history to trusted contacts. You know, you might even have a very high tie strength cousin or aunt or uncle that you actually never call or never text message, but only see in person. So that is definitely something to be aware of. You can't go from the communication history to the trustedness of a contact.
Hi, Frank. Thanks for the talk. So I want to start from the end. You in your discussion slide, you do a very good job of contrasting your findings with previous work. And so that made me think. So, for example, Dunbar's work and the other work you mentioned doesn't have anything to do with technology, right? So
Yeah.
Dunbar's work comes from measuring the size of our brain.
Exactly.
And it looks like your findings agree with those previous findings.
Yeah.
So that makes me wonder, to what extent you think your findings are attributed to social phone books? Or are you just capturing something that's kind of about fundamentally being human? For example, would your findings be the same if you studied people who don't use social phone books, but just normal phone books, or before that,
Sure.
Rolodex, or before that, I don't know, whatever, Clays?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think certainly in the era before the aggregated phone books, the phone books were much smaller in size because they were only the people you really called or texted that you would add to your phone book. And as we saw, the average is like 19, 17 people that they actually called or texted in the history. So I think looking at the social phone book then gives you this broader picture of their whole social network, right? You're looking at Facebook, you're looking at LinkedIn, you're looking at all of these different sources. So it gets to much more fundamentally all the people in our lives that we communicate with. So I think this gives us kind of the best glimpse we can get at what our communication practices are like and what our whole networks look like that we couldn't get with any single source before.
Thank you.
Thanks.
One question I had was, to what extent do people use their social phone book? Because lots of us just go to WhatsApp, and I don't know, I'm going to look through my social phone book now and delete a lot. But have a look at it. I go to email and I look
Yeah.
at contacts, or I look up on WhatsApp. Did you ask them how often they went straight to the contact app?
So we didn't ask how often they went to the contact app, but in other studies that we've run, in the US at least, phone and SMS are still the top 2 used apps on the device. So for those, you do need to go and pick the person to get there. Yeah.
Well, let's, Frank.